Welcome to Preparing Professionals as Change Agents to Promote Equity. I'm Dr. Lillian Duran from the University of Oregon.
And I'm Dr. Lauren Cizik from the University of Oregon.
So what is Project INICIO? We're here to describe a funded project to prepare speech and language pathologists and early interventionists. Is interdisciplinary training. INICIO stands for Interdisciplinary Interventionists and Clinicians Improving Outcomes. It was funded by OSEP and for 5 years. We're at the end of our project. This is our last year. And as I said earlier, it was designed to prepare SLP, speech and language pathologist, and early interventionist, early childhood special ed specialist to serve young children who are dual language learners with or at risk of disability. At the end of this project, we've trained 44 SLPs and ECSE specialists. So far, 21 have graduated. Some of them are in their second year and some of them are in their first year of the program. And our emphasis has been on the recruitment of underrepresented student populations. So why did we design this project? Well, Inicio means beginnings in Spanish. We realize that the foundation of all children's learnings happens right at the beginning when they enter our school programs. We also know that there are too few early childhood specialists and speech and language pathologists trained in early intervention to serve these students out in the field. Personnel shortages have been documented not only nationally, but also here regionally in Oregon. There's also a chronic lack of diversity in our professions, which makes it incredibly important that we're able to go out and seek underrepresented students to be in our cohort so that we can fund them, so that we have a population of professionals in the field that can better serve the populations and be a better match to the populations that they'll be serving. There's also an incredible need for training to ensure the appropriate assessment and intervention with young dual language learners, and few programs in our nation right now offer the specialized training in bilingual development, bilingual assessment, and bilingual intervention. There's also been minimal attention to interdisciplinary practices, and for those of us who come from the early intervention field, such as myself, we know that we're collaborating all the time with our speech and language pathology professionals in the field, and we need to design our training programs in order to better prepare early career professionals to be able to work together effectively and collaboratively. And SLPs in particular have minimal opportunities for robust training in early intervention and early childhood special ed. Given that their licensure and certification really spans the lifetime, it's difficult for many of the programs to really specialize in early intervention, which is why we had this focus. So more about why we designed this project. Obviously, any of you out in the field realize that dual language learners are an increasingly large growing demographic in the United States, which is exciting because it brings cultural and linguistic diversity into our programs. Most are Spanish English dual language learners, and the focus of this program was specifically on that population, but most of the information that we included and content we included could generalize across multilingual and multicultural populations. The vast majority of early childhood or children that are served under early childhood special education also have disabilities in speech and or language development, and this emphasizes the importance of having SLPs and ECSE professionals collaborate. And as we all know, these children face challenges to equity in outcomes and equity in service delivery, making the need even more pronounced to have specialized professionals in the field that can meet their needs.
So in order to respond to the shortage of special education personnel with the lived experiences and the proper training in supporting young dual language learners with disabilities, we formed a team of stakeholders to collaborate on the development of the program in the first year of our funding. So these individuals weighed in on the content of the Project INICIO curriculum and the delivery of the shared practica. This included our community practitioners who were a bilingual Spanish-English speech-language pathologist working in early intervention, early childhood special education, a bilingual Spanish-English early interventionist developmental specialist, a Spanish interpreter for our local early intervention, early childhood special ed agency, and a Spanish-English bilingual Head Start administrator for our county Head Start program. We also included academic experts who were 4 researchers who focused on dual language development and disorders in the delivery of culturally and linguistically responsive early special ed services to dual language learners. 2 of those 4 experts also had led OSEP-funded personnel preparation grants. We also funded 9 students in the first year, 5 who were training to be speech-language pathologists and 4 who were training to be early childhood special ed teachers in the first year to pilot the program and provide us with regular feedback about their experience. And some of these students did indeed identify as Latina, as Spanish proficient, as first-generation students, and/or as non-traditional students to the profession. Finally, we included parents of young children with disabilities from Spanish-speaking homes who participated in our first 2 Project INICIO practica in that first year, which we'll describe shortly. And these families provided us with feedback on their experiences and how we might improve our training to support other families in the future. Through this collaboration with stakeholders, we finalized 8 learning competencies for our Project INICIO scholars, all of which are listed here. Some of these competencies are general in nature that will support scholars to gain the overarching skills they need to be successful in completing assessments and interventions in early intervention and early childhood special education settings, such as establishing the foundational knowledge of regulations and policies, gaining the skills necessary to collaborate across disciplines, practicing involving families in ways that account for their values and goals for their child, and learning how to access, review, and apply research to stay up to date with best practices. Other of these competencies are more specific to the unique needs of young dual language learners and ensuring that they receive timely access to high quality assessments and interventions that are relevant to their backgrounds and address communication development in particular. For example, scholars are expected to demonstrate knowledge of the processes of atypical and typical dual language development and apply this information to select, administer, and interpret least biased assessment measures to determine whether the child is presenting with natural features of learning 2 languages from an early age or a true disability, irrespective of their dual language background, which we know is one of the most important things to be thinking about when we're assessing communication in this population. Scholars are also responsible for learning how to critically evaluate existing interventions for their cultural and linguistic appropriateness and how to modify such interventions to best support the outcomes of dual language learners in both of their languages in ways that support all of their cultures. So these 8 competencies were addressed primarily through coursework and practica that the Project INICIO scholars completed together. Our speech-language pathology students took 2 courses that are already required for our early intervention, early childhood special ed master's program that included foundations in early intervention, early childhood special ed, which established their knowledge of federal and state legislative decisions, regulations, policies, procedures, and ethics affecting the profession, and address atypical and typical development across all domains of development. They also took family-guided early intervention, which addresses family involvement and the cultural, socioeconomic, ethical, political, linguistic, and historical factors that influence child development. Our early intervention scholars took 1 course required for speech-language pathology students, language disorders in young children, which addresses the early assessment of and intervention for disabilities in the area of communication specifically. We also created 2 specialized seminar classes for 1 credit each to dive deep into the theory and processes of early dual language development and disorders and the best practice approaches for assessment and intervention with dual language learners. In these classes, students engaged in practical application of the content with real children and families participating in the practica, as well as with simulated cases when in-person application was not possible. The 2 shared practica were also entirely unique to Project INICIO and involved services to Spanish-speaking families with children ages 2 to 5 with disabilities. I'll describe each of these practica in a moment. Note that the delivery of the summer preschool through Project INICIO was also supported by 2 shared classes unique to Project INICIO that were focused on designing and preparing the preschool curriculum and then teaming and problem solving once the summer preschool was underway. So our first practicum related to Project INICIO is Language and Play Every Day in Español, or LAPE, as the families coined it. It's an 8-week evidence-based caregiver-centered naturalistic communication intervention that was carefully adapted for Spanish-speaking families in our local community. The goal of the intervention is to teach children's caregivers language facilitation strategies that can be used in everyday, naturally occurring routines in order to grow children's rate of communication and their expressive and receptive vocabularies. Families are welcome to participate if they speak Spanish at home and have a child who is experiencing an early language delay. Our scholars collaborated with early intervention, early childhood special education agencies in our state and practitioners to make referrals to this supplemental program, and we keep them informed of the intervention activities and family progress through weekly newsletters and a final progress report. When we were able to deliver LAPE in person, INICIO scholars ran both a caregiver education group in Spanish and a separate simultaneous child play group. We were successful in moving LAPE to remote delivery to respond to COVID-19 restrictions. In this case, the intervention sessions were one-on-one with families in their home via Zoom. In both cases, intervention sessions with caregiver involved some topical education using adult learning principles, observation of caregivers applying strategies with their child in home routines, and caregiver reflection using their videos, as well as exemplar videos developed for the program. INICIO scholars worked together to plan and deliver the sessions to caregivers and children, and were supervised by a bilingual Spanish-English speech-language pathologist, and in some cases, they also collaborated with a Spanish interpreter.
So we also, as one of our practica experiences, we led a summer preschool program, a bilingual preschool program, where the students served Spanish-speaking children in Head Start and some who were receiving special education services in an inclusive setting. The communication disorder students and the early intervention students co-designed the curriculum and collaborated to lead the classroom activities in English and in Spanish, while focusing on developing early language and literacy skills. Importantly, the students and that interdisciplinary interaction, they were able to really build on each other's competencies and strengths given their other training programs, and in that way supported each other in designing a very effective preschool program over the summer. Unfortunately, during COVID, we weren't able to maintain this experience, and instead we had to lead other practice-based courses to supplement and for the lack of ability to serve students in person. So in addition to the coursework, we've described the coursework, we've described the practicum experiences that we offered students so that they could be able to apply all the knowledge they had gained in our program. We also wrote in additional supports into this grant. These additional supports included books and materials so that our scholars would leave with a library of books that could serve them well as they entered the field. We also covered some operational costs for LAPE and Boost. And so all of those costs were written into the grant as well. As an example, in order to get children to the preschool program, we provided transportation, and we were able to do that through OSEP funding. Additionally, we organized Spanish classes for our students who were not proficient in Spanish. Many individuals wish they knew Spanish and want an opportunity to be able to learn as an adult so they can more effectively communicate with children and families. I was able to connect with a teacher that I've known for 10 years in Mexico, who we were able to Zoom in and who met weekly with our students to deliver targeted Spanish classes based on their level of proficiency. And while we had recruited some native Spanish speakers into the program, she was able to differentiate instruction and provide them professional language that they could use in the field with families, such as speech and language terminology and special education terminology. For our beginning students, she made them just feel comfortable singing songs, greetings, and being able to use some basic communication with families to make them feel comfortable and to build that bridge between them and the children and families they will serve. We were also able to hire interpreters because, again, not all of our students were proficient in Spanish, but this gave them the opportunity to be able to work with an interpreter and learn the skills necessary in the field that they will need to have to be able to collaborate effectively with an interpreter and build relationships with families and children through the use of an interpreter. We recognize this as a shortcoming in most of our training programs, and that is not just instinctive knowledge to be able to work with an interpreter, and specialized training is needed to be more effective when working with interpreters in the field, particularly since many don't have a specialized training. Those individuals that we hire in the field, it's up to the professionals to guide them in appropriate interactions with the children and families through our special education processes. We also were able to provide some induction services. They were supported early in their career with professional membership fees being paid so that they could join DEC and also ASHA, and those specialized special interest groups that specifically are devoted to serving multilingual and multicultural populations. We also continue to provide some continued consultation through INICIO, through social media, open office hours, and other contacts and emails that we had with our alumni.
To measure the effectiveness of all of this training that we just described and the supports we provided in Project INICIO, and to support ongoing revisions to best meet our scholars' needs, our scholars complete a variety of assessments while they are in their master's program and also once they have graduated and have been out in the field for about a year. So prior to beginning the INICIO training, students self-assess their knowledge and skills pertinent to serving children with disabilities and their families, their degree of cultural competence for serving children from diverse cultural and linguistic backgrounds, and their confidence in serving DLLs and diverse populations. They also complete these surveys once again when they've completed their INICIO-related coursework and practica at the end of that first year. In addition, they submit a written narrative that describes the principles they will use to guide their practice with dual language learners. Our graduates also complete a self-assessment of their preparedness for the job demands in early intervention, early childhood special ed settings. Their employers provide a rating of the graduates' knowledge and skills, and we send surveys to families of children who are dual language learners and they are being served by our graduates so that they can rate their satisfaction with the services. We also attempt to collect data on child outcomes, and all of this data together is informing how well this training is working and what modifications we may want to make. Well, we're not able to share all of the outcome data given the limited time we have for this presentation today. We would like to share findings, pre-post findings specific to scholars' competence and their cultural competence. And this includes two measures. The first is the Scholar Competence Survey, which is a self-assessment of scholars' competence specific to serving children with disabilities from Spanish-speaking backgrounds, who, as Lillian mentioned, comprise the largest population of dual language learners in the United States. Scholars rate their competence on a 5-point Likert type scale for a total of 9 items relevant to assessment and intervention with young Spanish-speaking dual language learners, such as how confident do you feel assessing bilingual children whose primary language is Spanish? Higher scores naturally indicate greater confidence in serving this population. Scholars also complete the General Cultural Competence Assessment Instrument in order to assess multiple components of cultural competence among folks in educational and healthcare settings, including behaviors that relate to being a culturally responsive practitioner, being culturally aware and sensitive, being culturally humble, and having the skills needed to respond to various cultures and languages. Students respond with their level of agreement to 25 items, such as I include cultural assessment when I do client or family evaluations. And the ratings provide a score where higher scores indicate greater cultural competence. As I mentioned, each scholar also writes a guiding principles narrative, and this is a 5-page reflection paper that they complete in the final term of their training that encourages them to reflect critically on their journey through Project INICIO and to use stories to illustrate how their assumptions about providing services to dual language learners and their families were challenged or changed or reinforced as their guiding principles emerge. We asked scholars to discuss the insights they gained, how they changed as a learner, and what influenced their learning. We're in the process now of qualitatively analyzing in depth the scholars' guiding principle narratives to understand how they're interpreting this experience in their program and to really tap into those specific experiences of Project INICIO that were the source of shifts in our scholars becoming more equitable, least biased practitioners.
All right, so now we're going to shift to some of our program outcomes. So just to let you know, who were our scholars? Who did we serve in this program? So as I mentioned, we focused on recruitment of scholars who were traditionally underrepresented, both in the fields of speech and language pathology and early intervention, early childhood special ed. There were a total of 20 EI ECSE specialists and 24 SLPs funded through the project. 42% who identified as a member of a minoritized community, 53% who spoke languages other than English, and these languages were not only Spanish, but included Japanese, Russian, American Sign Language, Hebrew, Mandarin Chinese, and Amharic. Of the 21 scholars who graduated from Project INICIO to date, 71% found employment in settings serving young children with disabilities immediately upon graduation. And so data included in this report is from a subsample of our total population, given that we needed consent for participation in this research. So from here on out, all the data will be from those 18 scholars who consented to research. So who did we serve in the community? An important focus in this program was also how we embed our students in the community and how we bring our services out into the community to help not only our practitioners have an opportunity to apply the knowledge they gained, but also to really show that we were invested in the communities that we want to serve. So LAPE has served a total of 28 Spanish-speaking families and 30 toddlers with expressive language delays from years 1 through 4. Attendance averaged 6.5 out of 8 sessions, so there's a high level of attendance and participation on the part of the families. And from year 1 data collected by Dr. Sisek, families' anonymous rating of satisfaction with the program was 6.8 out of 7, so very high ratings of satisfaction with the program from the families that participated. Caregivers improved delivery of communication facilitation strategies, and children improved vocabulary and rate of communication based on the intervention. Even though it was of short duration, it was obviously of enough intensity to be able to create some positive changes. Boost was able to serve 20 Spanish-English dual language learners ages 3 to 5 with or at risk of disabilities. Again, given COVID related constraints, we were not able to host Boost the last 2 summers. The family satisfaction surveys from year 1 were very high, and all families indicated that they noted at least one improvement in their child's developing, including increasing Spanish and English vocabulary, social emotional skills, and kindergarten preparation. We also ran some simple t-tests and effect sizes to look at differences in their confidence levels. Dr. Sisek explained what the confidence survey entailed, and what we found was a large effect size of 1.62 on this measure in our scholars' self-reporting gained confidence in their ability to serve these children and families. On the cultural competence scale, this was a scale again where scholars did self-rate their sense of competence in being able to serve these populations. And again, we found a large effect size of 1.25. On both tests, obviously, we also found significance in our t-tests. Given the smaller sample size, the effect size is probably more accurate in this case. But what we are demonstrating in this program is that our scholars are gaining the skills that we would hope they would and that we targeted through our objectives in Project INICIO. We then, as we noted, we're beginning to look at our guiding principles the guiding principles narratives that our students wrote, and we wanted to share some of the quotes that we received from our students through their guiding principle narratives. I did find some themes that were emerging as I was reviewing these narratives, and so I have grouped these quotes under some common themes that showed up across our students' written materials. So theme 1 was this need and great learning in the area of appropriate dual language assessment practices. And so the first quote says, "The most wonderful gift that INICIO has given me is the gift of knowledge on bilingual language development and the tools to be able to differentiate a true disorder from a language difference. Appropriate assessment practices, in my experience, are alarmingly underutilized, and dual language learners are often being overdiagnosed due to a general lack of awareness on bilingual language development in our field." This is obviously a direct relationship to the amount of time and energy we put not only into our coursework, but allowing our students in practice in effectively delivering these assessments to children through our practicum experiences. Theme number 2, the importance of bilingual intervention. Personally, I have seen the positive effects of intervention being provided in the home language, both in LAPE and Boost classrooms. In LAPE, families saw many gains in mean length of utterance and communication rate as a result of clinicians speaking to the children in their dominant language. In Boost, we used a curriculum that focused on completing similar lessons in both the L1 and L2, so first language and second language, on separate days, and saw great gains in the children in terms of vocabulary development. Both of these experiences are valuable because they showed us what culturally and linguistically responsive treatment looks like in a real classroom with real dual language learners. And I think this particular quote speaks to the importance of offering these practicum experiences within our OSEP grant funding opportunities so their students have the actual opportunity to apply the principles learned in these programs before they're out in the field. Theme 3 had the importance of advocacy. Given the title of this presentation, Dr. Sisek and I have thought a lot about how do we promote advocacy in our students so that once they're out in the field, they will not feel like they have to simply go with the flow or go with the systems that are currently in place, but they will feel the strength to actually challenge some of those systems that might be creating inequity in outcomes and disparities in the services that these children are receiving. So one student wrote, I have received special education or special training and granted access to the latest research to prepare me to work with bilingual clients and families. It is my responsibility to use that education to advocate for the rights of individual families and clients, fight for appropriate policies, legislation at all levels, workplace, district, state, federal, offer to educate, train, and share research with fellow SLPs, other professional colleagues, including administrators, educators, early interventionists, etc., and any other group that may benefit from that information. Another student wrote, I found the Day on the Hill experience to be inspiring and will work to stay informed on legislation that may impact my clients and to support them to the best of my abilities. I believe we have a responsibility not only as clinicians, but as human beings to support the success of our clients in and out of the clinic. This means that in addition to lobbying for career-related legislation, such as the class limitations or defining services Medicare can reimburse, it is also important to advocate for broader social issues such as immigrant rights and healthcare access for all. And we were hoping through this program that our students would see the Bronfenbrenner model, looking at ecological systems theory, how those state policies really affect the services that we're able to deliver, and then at the microsystem, how they affect those children and families. And theme 4 here was the importance of supporting families in maintaining their home language. This student wrote, during the Language and Play Every Day in Español sessions, it was very powerful to witness the impacts of parental involvement in child language interventions. This would not have been possible if the home language was not supported and celebrated through the LAPE sessions. As previously mentioned, there are so many myths surrounding bilingualism that pervade caregivers' opinions about how to raise their children. While I cannot tell clients or families what to do, I can be sure to share what I know. My training in Project INICIO has reinforced the fact that having access to your home language will always be an asset to any dual language learner, and that is something I will always share with my future clients. And again, we see that now we've set up our practitioners to build those bridges with families and provide them evidence-based information about supporting their home languages and cultures that will benefit those children into the future.
As I described earlier, we also ask scholars who have been in the field for a year to share the level of the support they feel they need for key practices in their professional work. Of our 8 graduates who have responded so far, all indicated that they were well prepared to demonstrate professionalism, to understand the features of typical and atypical development, to involve families, to implement and evaluate culturally and linguistically responsive interventions, to collaborate across disciplines and agencies, and to apply research to their practice. However, some have reported that they need more support for assessment and particularly for leadership and advocacy efforts, especially as pertaining to supporting colleagues with limited knowledge of or training with dual language learners. Scholars have also shared particular aspects of INICIO that have been beneficial, which includes that practical aspect of learning how to assess children's language exposure, how to collect family report, how to ask families about their cultural values and preferences in a way that is respectful and family-friendly, how to understand and explain the difference between a language disorder and a language difference in children who are dual language learners, and creating activities that truly promote DLL's family and culture. In addition, we've gathered some informal qualitative data from graduates who attended 2 of our open office hours with myself and Dr. Duran this past year. These graduates have reported much success in informing families about the importance of maintaining their home languages to counteract negative messages about bilingualism. However, they have faced really significant challenges advocating with colleagues and administrators to ensure that children receive the most responsive, least biased assessments that are equitable and will lead to accurate eligibility decisions. And they're also describing facing some microaggressions in classrooms, such as being told that children aren't allowed to speak Spanish in the classroom or that they shouldn't use Spanish in their interventions. And these are situations that really challenge scholars to respond appropriately. So all are asking for ongoing support with assessment and intervention, particularly for working with children who speak languages other than Spanish and English, and more skills in how to be an advocate for equity in the field. So all of these data together are promising indicators that our Project INICIO training has been quite impactful in supporting scholars in several of the stated competency areas, especially as related to collaborating with families and delivering assessments and interventions that are truly responsive to children's home languages and cultures. The scholars are leaving the program more confident serving dual language learners and with stronger skills in being equitable practitioners. However, there's clearly a need to build on this training to emphasize how to apply these concepts and practices to children from other linguistically marginalized backgrounds, including those who may speak dialects of English that vary from the standard. And as I mentioned, scholars are still looking for some more targeted support in how to be advocates and leaders in the field. So while we were fairly successful in recruiting a diverse pool of scholars, we also recognize a need to increase the proportion of scholars of color and from other underrepresented backgrounds in our training. So to build on the strengths that we described, as well as address these areas of need, we recently submitted an application to OSEP for another master's level personnel preparation grant that will more broadly address inequities in early intervention, early childhood special ed, serving communities of color, not only Spanish English speakers, and increase funding and distance offering to better recruit and retain scholars of color. And finally, we do need to acknowledge some limitations. While these preliminary analyses provide quite a bit of insight here, there is some shortcomings of our research on this training so far. So first, data collection is ongoing. So we have a cohort of scholars finishing up this year and another cohort, our final cohort, entering in the fall. So we have still several cohorts who have not been out in the field for a year. Thus, we haven't collected all of the pre-post data or all of the graduate data to share with you today. Second, we've made quite a number of revisions over the years to respond to scholars' need, family feedback, and significant structural changes in both the early intervention master's program and the speech language pathology master's program here at University of Oregon, and modifications to account for COVID-19 restrictions. So there is some variability in our training year from year that makes comparing the scholar outcomes a bit more challenging. And finally, we have not yet had the funding to collect data on a control group of master's students who did not receive INICIO funding to determine causality of our outcomes. So some of the skills related to INICIO training are also promoted in other coursework that scholars across our master's program take. So we do want to do additional testing with a control group in the future to really understand the true effect of Project INICIO on our scholars' skills in going out into the field. So that wraps up our presentation today. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to joining you in the breakout groups. But if you can't join us, please don't hesitate to contact us with questions. We posted our email address here.
Yep, thank you so much. We're happy to connect if you're interested in learning more about our program or collaborating in any way.
Thank you.
Thanks.